Hello everyone, this is Firestar Role Playing, welcoming you to another episode in this Within Your Fire starting guide. This time we're going to be doing a primer on the races. What that means is essentially we're going to be going through them, giving you a very brief description of the races in the saga book here, and maybe try to tell you if this race or species will fit your saga or your catalyst. As we go on, I will potentially do some deep dives on these. If you go to the community tab on my YouTube, I do polls every day, sometimes just for fun, sometimes for what video I'm going to do, and whenever it gets to the point where which video I'm going to do, we've already voted that I'm going to do a deep dive on humans first. And in the future after that, you can also still have time to go to the community tab on YouTube to vote on what you want to see. But without further ado, let's get started. We're starting off with the dirty, the greedy, the downtrodden, the forsaken, the cast down from on high Farum. The Farum closest analog, and I'll try to give these where I can, some of them don't really have these. The closest analog is a dwarf to a standard D&D style setting. But as you're going to find out, they're very different from dwarves when you start digging into it. But that's a good place to start thinking about them. They're long-lived, slow to mature, and slow to forgive. They are people of iron. And this iron, it populates their religion, it populates their mindset for currency and everything. It's this will of iron, if you will. They are stubborn, and once they're wronged, as it said, they are slow to forgive. They grow their beards out in disdain of the divine, who they feel abandoned them with their creator, to who forsook them in their time of great need. Whether or not this was justified is up for debate, but they do feel wronged by it, and in their view it was not justified. In their view, they were abandoned. The Farum are prone to stillbirths, making it so that their population is very hard to maintain. This is in addition to having a very long pregnancy cycle. So the sterols and this long pregnancy cycle and all this makes it so that the Farum are slowly losing their numbers. Some even suspect they might go extinct within the next 1,000 cycles or so. Now, what are the Farum good at, and what are they bad at? The Farum are good jewelers, they're good smiths, they're good with crushing weapons, the warhammer and whatnot. They're very stocky. They're not very charismatic, but they can take a beating. They are good at fighting Fae. They're good at not getting eaten because they taste horrible to any species, so nothing will hunt them for food. But they cannot swim at all. They sink straight to the bottom regardless of their grades in athletics, whether in water. And they're very slow. Not necessarily clumsy, but just very slow. So what would be a good idea for the Farum? Why would you want to play them? Well, they have a love for gold, so you could very easily make a Farum merchant who is obsessed with collecting as much gold as possible. You can make a Farum warrior who wants to restore the glory days of the ancient Farum Empire, and they have more than enough benefits and strengths to lend to battle that they could do this in. They're a very stocky and hardy race that can take some hits and deal out some hits, especially against them no good dirty fake. A treasure hunter is another good idea. Once again, giving into the level of gold, but you can also go with more of a scholarly treasure hunter. Maybe you're looking for what you can dig up from the ashes of the Farum Empire, and what you can maybe find to bring forth and maybe try to restore this empire. But these are just a few ideas for the Farum. So once again, if you want to see more of a deep dive on them, leave it in the comments below. But until then, we're going to move on to the next person in our list, which is the Freyne. The closest analog to this is like a high elf type character, but even more so than the Farum. These Freynes go much farther from elves than Farum do from dwarves. You could almost convert a dwarf into a Farum, but you cannot really convert an elf into a Freyne. But it will give you the faintest idea of what they're going to be like. They are children of light and dream. Calmness is viewed as more important than any other trait to them. To lose control of oneself is the greatest sin, for without control you are nothing. And now this leads to the fear of loss of tranquility. Why are they so scared of this loss of tranquility? Well, the succubi hunt Freyne souls, and if the Freynes lose their tranquility, then they become vulnerable to having their souls literally stolen from them, a fate worse than death. And so they drill this into every Freyne that you must keep control of yourself. You must practice this meditation. You must have this calmness within you. You must become one with with the daydream. And this is enforced by a matriarchal society. Now, this is basically a polar opposite of feudal Earth, where the females are the dominant ones. They're larger than the males. They're the warriors. They're the leaders. And the males function in a very similar way that females functioned in real history in the feudal ages, as more or less second-class citizens. They're not downright slaves, but they have a lot less rights. They cannot hold any position of high honor. You could probably get away with a male becoming like a knight, maybe, but even then that would be the exception and not the norm. And even if you did manage to do that, you would never rise above that without, I guess, marrying. Like, if you marry a woman who's higher station than you, you could probably get some degree of power there, but mostly you're looking at the women. And for those women, they even have a hierarchy as well. There are 3 types of Freynes. I'm not going to go super detail into them, but there are the ones born close to noon, the ones born during the dawn, and the ones born during the afternoon. And each of these are different. You have the various skin color changes, hair color changes, eye color changes, and this goes further beyond just appearance, because this is a caste system where the noon touched, with the gold skin having the highest stations afforded to them, where the more pale skin with like a blonde hair most of the time are more of the middle class. And then there are the ones born in the morning, which is the time of Elsom, the divinity of succubi, who have pink hair and pink eyes and such, and therefore the lowest strata of society. Even their females are not afforded high status and high station, and they are treated poorly. You would probably see a gold-skinned male would be treated better than a Dagataka female, as it were. Now, before we spend too much time delving into Freynes, let's talk about what they're good at and what they're bad at. They are dexterous, they have a high presence, they're a little bit less hardy than normal, but they're also very good at acrobatics and art and imitation and weaving. They're more attractive than most. They get bonuses to wearing quilted jerkins. A little side note is their face lights up when they become happy, with the brightness varying according to the level of pleasure, from barely noticeable to bright as a torch. And as I talked about before, they're hunted by the succubi, and they have this tranquility that they must maintain or risk having their soul stolen. Now, what would be a good idea for you to play a Freyne? Well, if you want to play that gender role flipped, if you want to see what it would be like to play in a world where the females were the dominant and the males were the submissive in the caste of a feudal society, Freynes are good for you. Once again, the Freynes are creatures of light, so they do have some association with gold there, and they have praised the Oste, the god of commerce, and founded the key city of trade, so a merchant would be good for a Freyne, as well as you could play a Freyne knight who battles against the horrors of the dark forest and battles back against the Mihangi. But moving on to our next one, remember, you can let me know in the comments below if you want to see more of a deep dive on the Freyne. We have humans. Now, humans are probably the closest thing you're going to get to something that you understand very quickly. They are literally just humans in real life, but with a huge number of variants. They have all kinds of different skin colors and eye colors and hair colors, way more than even real life, such as one pretty outlandish one is blue skin, white eyes, and white hair. Is just one of many types, and then you can mix and match them as well. Humans are essentially a polar opposite of Freynes. They are a patriarchy instead of a matriarchy, where the men rule, and the humans were created in a world that had no place for them. They're a young race, and they have to fight for everything they have. They also practice polygamy, which is fairly different from most cultures in real life. It's a really big thing where the men take multiple wives, which is one thing particularly to note about the biggest difference between most medieval cultures and humans here. There are 76 tribes of humanities, one for each day in the cycle, minus the first day, but that's a story for another time. And some of these tribes have been wiped out, some of them are still strong, like the tribe of King Bram, the founder of Baal. Now, what are humans good at? Well, what are humans good at in real life? A little bit of everything. They have a higher skill cap for their intelligence. They gain bonus fortes. Their only weakness is they're not specialized. They don't have anything that they are better than everyone else at. But they are just overall adaptable creatures, and that's the kind of character you should be looking for if you want to play a human. You can play someone who is adaptable to adapt to any situation. You can play an adventurer, you can play a merchant, you can play a clergy, you can play a king, you can play a whatever you want, a beggar, miner, lumberjack, anything you can imagine. The human can pretty much fit that role, and it will also have a more specific thing of playing a role about fighting against and rebelling against the world as you try to find a place for you and yours in it. Moving on to Kalfar now. Kalfar, the closest thing I could do is compare them to Drow, at least in appearance, but they act nothing like Drow at all. And we're getting really into the point where we're not going to have many analogs to draw at all after this. But for the Kalfar themselves, desperation is their dominant personality trait. They view the world and everyone in it as against them, not too terribly unlike the humans. Because of this, the actions that would be considered extreme by other civilized species are viewed as simply common part of life. Their inborn survival instinct is extremely strong. Combined with their outlook on life, this means they must take drastic actions in order to survive. Many see them as autocratic, ruthless, selfless, paranoid, immoral, and anything else. Trust is unknown amongst them. And this is for they spawned forth from a forbidden marriage between a tribe of Mihangi and a group of Kalfar. A group of Freyne, sorry, where they were banished. They were not allowed to have this marriage. Dazazay and Ajira actually worked together for the only time in history they'd ever done so. And they worked together to curse their children and their children's children and their children's children, stripping the Fae status from them, making them something lesser, something in between. Something that some divinities even forgot about, with the fact that they are actually one of the only species able to reproduce with humans, because humans are normally banned from essentially reproducing with anything besides humans, thanks to Pelgan's law. But the Kalfar slipped through. And that's a pretty interesting character right there, where you could have a Kalfar human romance of some sort. Now, what are Kalfar good at? They're very dexterous. They're very uh, charismatic, like they have a very strong presence. They're good at hiding, and they're good at appraising. They start with a bonus opulence, which means they start with more money than normal. But they're also cursed with their meditation is lower when it comes to the astral and the dreaming. They get a horrible negative to diplomacy versus either of their parent species, and they are generally hated by them. They are also more attractive than normal, much like the Freyine. And any Kalfar who has hate within them has an extra point of it when dealing with their parent species. Kalfar are a complex race that you're going to have to really dig into. And you can make some very interesting characters. You can make a character who is survival at any cost. You can make a character who, despite his lineage, wants to do better and wants to be better and be a better person. There's so many conflicts that you can go down the road with Kalfar in. So once again, let me know if you want to see more of a deep dive on them. Now we have the Mihan-Gi. The Mihan-Gi are the first Fae. They call themselves Mihan-Gi, which means the only true Fae. To most of the world, they are known as wolf fairies. To understand them, you must first understand their mentality is deeply seated in the unwavering view that the world belongs to their divinities. They feel the world must be well taken care of before their masters ultimately unravel it, so a more perfect world may be born in its place. They're spun from the essence of fear, and so their aura commands attention and inspires terror. They are pack hunters, and they are living embodiments of fear. They will terrorize others to the point of death, gives them near orgasmic rushes. They hate fire and sunlight and refuse to touch gold, deeming it an unwholesome substance, but wood is more of a holy aspect to them. Not quite literally holy, or it literally is in some cases, but they hold it in a much higher regard. But the Freyines despise trees, the Mihan-Gi love them. The Mihan-Gi are split into a great variety of tribes, the 11 tribes. Each of them have their own special flavor to them that we can get into in a more in-depth video. They're strict carnivores, where the Freyines are strict vegetarians. Their Freyines are the light reflection of Mihan-Gi. Everything I said about Freyines is almost opposite in Mihan-Gi, but the gender structure in Mihan-Gi is much more equal. They don't really care so much about gender as the other species do. It's more about the person than the gender. But what are they good at? Once again, they are dexterous with a very strong presence and a lower capacity for vig. They are good at stealth and hunting. They're poets. They are terrifying. They have a species granted bonus to intimidating literally every other species. They're extremely fast, and they can react on a dime. They can see in complete darkness. They have long, thick teeth that allow them to deliver powerful bites. They, like all Fae, are weak to Thulian blood iron, and it burns them at the touch, and they cannot pass through a doorway with it under it or hanging above it, and direct sunlight is poison to them. And those that are not used to it become highly disoriented. Now, what kind of a character do you want to make with a Mihan-Gi? You can be a spy, you can be a hunter, you can be a villain, or you can be a hero. Mihan-Gi is a very dark species, but they also have red caps who try to overcome this darkness with Ku. They have people who embrace this darkness. They have people who are more family oriented. Mihan-Gi, while they're horror incarnate to the other species, to each other they are loyalty incarnate. So you could really play that with a saga full of Mihangi just centered around a tribe in the forest with that deep connection. They don't really have to worry about politicking and betrayal and stuff that most other species do. They work together in a way that is very alien to most others, to the point where some species even think that they're a hive mind. But yes, there's much, much more to go into with Mihangi, so let's move on. We're already over 20 minutes in this video, but I am trying my best to keep it brief. There's a lot to say here. Ogres. They are aggressive, impulsive, and savage. No one else is as tough-minded as these poor, tortured creatures. It's not that they're cruel, but they simply have little inborn capacity to be tender. These ogres are extremely brave and loyal and overall a fair-minded people. Some do look at ogres as being dumb and they pay them the ogre's wage, as it were. But ogres have no penalty to intelligence. It is just they're perceived this way as brutes. An ogre can be just as intelligent as almost anyone else. You can have an ogre who is a scholar out there who proves the people wrong. But these ogres, they have to accept a lot in life as the common man, the man's man, if you will. They're down in the dirt and the mud. They're doing the jobs no one else wants to do. They don't really have an organized culture, per se. Like, they don't have an organized nation. They have many large clans, which are often ruled by the strongest male. While physical might usually determines leadership, it's usually always controlled by the smartest or craftiest member, because you might have a figurehead who is the strongest ogre in the village, but the smartest is going to be behind them. They love sports. They are strict carnivores as well. They also view rites of cannibalism as holy, where while Mihangi will eat other sentient creatures, they will not eat each other, but ogres will eat just about anything. And they think there's no greater honor to a foe than to eat their heart, keeping its essence alive within you. So what are they good at? Well, obviously, they're brutes. They can take a beating and deal one right back at you. They're a relatively low presence. Their enlightenment is not great. Their dexterity is not great either. But they have a species granted forte in slams because they can pick you up and throw you back down to the ground again. They have a higher health than normal. And they even have some slight skills in painting. Even if you don't have any points an artist. It's just an intrinsic thing to ogres that they know a little bit about painting. And they have these cave paintings and whatnot. They're very intimidating, not as much as Mihangi, but they do get some bonus. They can see much farther in dim light, and they are hypersensitive. They are not hypersensitive to Thulian blood iron like the other Fae. They do have a rage within them that builds up, and anytime they try to make a meditation roll, they can make a roll using their rage instead that is within them. And if they succeed using this, they fly into a violent rage and do not stop attacking the object of the rage until they're destroyed or otherwise prevented from attacking. Things can be both a weakness and an advantage depending on how you look at it. Ogre's hate is lowered when in the presence of Freyene, and they actually have a very special relationship with the Freyene that we can get into more later. And they also have a weaker connection to the astral and to the dream than other Fae. They still need to sleep, unlike others. And while they are Fae, they are the least Fae-like of the Fae. So what kind of character could you play as an ogre? As I said before, you could go with a more brutish type character, or you go with a more scholarly type character. An ogre merchant actually was one of the regents in trade and one of the richest men in the world. So there's some ways you could subvert expectations of your ogre, or you could just give in to some good old-fashioned body slams and chokeholds with him, and either way, it works just fine for an ogre. Now we have the orc. The orcs are one of the most complicated of the races in Kvegathale. Maybe not so much as a Kalfar, but still very complex. They are the longest lived of the races in the saga book, and their entire life revolves around to know one's place in time. This is their greatest philosophy. They're tolerant, but their long memories and great appreciations of history led them to be reluctant to accept outsiders. They celebrate their ancestors and they keep great records of them, which can number as many as 6,000 that they read off on stone tablets on special occasions and ceremonies. They believe the only true failure is to fail to learn from your mistakes. They also crave new experiences far less than most because they live such long lives. They prefer to avoid risk, but they always are straightforward with you. They seem almost braggadocious at times, but they base one's self-esteem upon their honest appraisal of one's effort. And they strive to be honest like that and be open with you because they see if they have something good to say about you, then it is a great dishonor to not tell you that. So, what is an orc good at? An orc is more hardy than normal, they're more enlightened than normal, but they have a little bit less of an intelligence cap than normal. Remember, all these bonuses are to your caps, not to your stats. Remember, as I explained in the character creation video. They have a species granted forte on winemaking, they have growing plants, and they have an innate knowledge of the trolls, their creators. They get a special bonus to their hide rating, which means they get bonus armor even without wearing armor. They gain a bonus to hit with wooden weapons. They can also add their intelligence if positive to resistance rolls made against spells, and they suffer less negatives from aging effects by certain spells. They also heal faster than normal, although they are much slower than normal, and they take a penalty when wearing metal armor or using metal weapons. So what kind of a character could you play as an orc? Well, the orc are very reverent of the trolls and magi in general, so playing essentially any sacred magi would be a great choice for an orc. Or you can go down the dark path, play a warlock. They're not just exiled, like a orc worships the gods, exiled, but the warlocks are killed using only the most brutal of rituals. But you could go down that path and play a darker orc. Or you could just play an orc who is tired of it all and you don't want to be a part of it all, and you play more of like a hermit orc who goes off and is tired of his people being judged, but he doesn't want to get involved with the gods and the demons and the angels of the world. He just wants to live a life and have a nice, simple scholar or farmer or something like that. Once again, there's many, many options within this Ring of Fire. Now we move on to the sirens. I'd just like to apologize about this picture. I had to cut it down because there's some nudity in it and I don't want to get banned by YouTube. So, sirens or storm sharks, they're prone to kleptomania and often find they've taken shiny objects or otherwise beautiful items without even realizing it. This does not help their reputation as pirates and thieves they have among other species. The female sirens tend to get along well with each other while the males are highly aggressive. The males compete in each other with contests of swimming, singing, artistic ability, wrestling, and other sports. This is done from a young age to help establish their place in society and typically done in front of future prospective mates. Male sirens are warlike and generally intolerant, resulting in violence as a first solution, which can make it difficult for them to be negotiated with. They have a deep and born need to believe they're superior to all other species. This dominates their psyche. They are a meritocracy that interweaves theocracy, creating a society dominated by the strongest, smartest, craftiest. There are often clashes between the more conservative components in the government and the more progressive secular branches in their societies. Sirens are aquatic. Amphibious, I suppose, is the better word for it. So they have lungs and gills that allow them to breathe both water and air, but they do require water to function. They must at least fully submerge themselves or fill its lungs with water for at least 30 minutes. Or they take 1 point of VIG damage. Oh, sorry, fill their lungs with air for at least 30 minutes or take 1 point of big damage. They have to do both. They cannot live underwater indefinitely, and they cannot live on land indefinitely. They have to spend at least 30 minutes in both, basically. It does heal at a rate of 1 per day if you meet both of these conditions, though. They're able to see twice as well as humans in dim light, and have a massive bonus to their swim speed, a plus 10 to their swimming speed. Sharks will never attack them, and they gain their status to any rolls relating to a shark. So there are like siren shark tamers and such. They have a resistance to sonic damage, and they have obviously fortes in swimming. They have fortes in all types of singing. They have beautiful singing voices. They, even if you don't have athletics, you still know how to swim. It's an inborn thing for sirens, because of course it is. They can use their voice as a weapon that will deal a sonic attack at an opponent. And they're also very weak to cold. They're creatures of warm water, so they take extra damage from being cold. They're also a little bit more hardy with a bonus to Vig. They have also a higher presence with a bonus to presence, with a slightly lower enlightenment rating. Now, what kind of character could you play with a siren? A siren could be a theologian. A siren could be a pirate. A siren could be someone who is a warrior trying to prove themselves on the world. Or maybe you're a female siren who wants to be a diplomat and try to make up for the brutishness of the males. As always, there are many choices that you could go through for this, and none of them are wrong. But now we move on to our last of the species in the core book. Ooh, we're over 30 minutes. Now we go to the Vaigesh. The people are strongest, steel, and harsh as the forge. They are rigid and rarely shift their views once they have settled on an idea. They're highly traditional. They place great values on the words of the philosopher and live their lives by them without question. A model for the perfect life has already been created, and if followed, they believe it will lead to the Vaigesh domination of Kavega Thale, and they follow this code and drill it into the minds of their children. The Vaigesh are a patriarchy. It has existed since the birth of the species. They have 9 noble houses that live within the Cold Cave. There was a 10th, but it's no more. The members of these houses refer to themselves as the true children, and each of them works towards making their house as strong as it can be through their actions. Their underclass is made up of those who had their clan names stripped, or scions of those who had their clan names stripped. They have a strict hierarchy with each house on all levels. The empire is ruled by a senate of 81 male Vaigesh, 9 from each house. It's rife with political intrigue, and senators arrange military campaigns, local government, and preside over the great academy, which educates all clan-born male children in philosophy, law and history, mathematics, religion, and warfare. So, as you can see, the Vaigesh are very ordered and very strict, and they follow a code, but their own code. They will never trade their steel weapons. Nothing is more highly valued than steel for them. They can give steel tools, though, but steel is a great commodity for them because that it is a gift from their god, their creator. So what are they good at then? They only have 1 stat modification, which is a +1 to dex. They're slightly more dexterous than normal, no other positives or negatives. They can see completely in darkness, and they have a fire tolerance that increases with their status, making them harder to damage with fire. And in fact, they clean themselves with fires. We'll get that in a minute. They also have a bonus to hydrating and any rolls involving crafting steel. Water rituals have no effect on them. Draining rituals have no effect on them as their bodies contain no water at all. They will never be taught the weapons of other houses, and if they attempt to use these weapons or the scimitar, which is the symbol of the house that's banned, they take a -2 penalty to hit, even if they otherwise had grades in that weapon skill. For water paralysis now, if they become fully submerged in water, their speed is halved and they lose their normal action. Every round fully submerged, they must make a no less than 18 on a conditioning poison check. They roll lower than this, they will be paralyzed in open rain. Their speed is reduced by up to 10 depending on how bad the storm is. All swim rolls automatically fail. This aversion to water causes many Vygesh to drown and gives them a general disdain for ships. So they kind of clean themselves with fire and torches and stuff like that rather than actually engaging with the water. And as you can probably tell, this is gonna have a really big effect on their life because they hate water so much and they don't even like to go on ships. You gotta think, how are they gonna deal with that? And that's a pretty interesting thing. They are carnivores as well. They consume no liquid, as is poisonous to them. They consume flame, and they can eat other sentient species, but it's their greatest taboo now. To be found guilty of doing so carries a death sentence. And what kind of a character would be good for the Vygesh? Well, you could play a house noble who is very well trained as a warrior or as a scholar or whatever your house specializes in. You could play possibly a member of the Senate. A whole game set around the Vygesh Senate would be an incredibly interesting saga, in my opinion, rife with political intrigue. You could play a castless who's been cast down to the bottoms of the cold cave. Maybe gang members who are trying to rise up. Maybe you're just trying to make your way, or maybe you just decided enough is enough and you just left. You've gone off somewhere else to try to escape the oppressive caste nature of the Vygesh. But whatever you choose to do, remember that within the Ring of Fire, the only thing that limits you is your imagination. Be creative, be original, have fun. And that is it for our primer on the species, almost 40 minutes long, a lot longer than I intended it to be. But this is my Firestyle Roleplaying signing off. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye. God bless. I will see you all in the next video. Don't forget to check the community tab to vote on what that might be. Right now, I have 2 videos lined up: a human deep dive and a Elder Creator primer, kind of like this one, but for the Elder Creators. I'll see you then.